You're listening to All Things Real Estate on Full Service Radio, 830 WCRN. Once again, here's your hosts, Gary Kelley and Brad Avergon.
Hi, welcome back to the show. It's Gary Kelley from RE/MAX Executive Realty along with
Brad Avergon of Envision Bank and Mortgage.
We're talking about the crazy marketplace that we find ourselves in, and maybe it's not crazy, maybe it's predictable. It's just the way it is right now. We've talked that it's hard to be a buyer right now. What about sellers? Okay, we talk to sellers all the time saying, is this the time? Is this ever going to be like this again? We have people saying, no need to stage the house. Why would you want to stage a house? No need for that, because it's going to sell. And to a degree, they're right. It's just how quickly it sells and at what price point. I still believe in staging. We also, one of the things that I like to do on certain tier properties is a pre-listing home inspection. So you can go through and find out what's wrong with the house and address it up front. Pre-listing home inspection, there's an argument that says if you know something's wrong with the house, you have to disclose it. My view is if we know something's wrong with the house, let's take care of it and then not have it come back and visit us again. What are your thoughts on the market that we're in right now that's a seller's market, Brad?
Well, I think absolutely, it's a great opportunity for sellers to not only sell their house at a fair value, but in my opinion, sell their house at what I would consider to be at an above market value. And that's kind of a weird way of terms because the market drives itself and is kind of self-correcting. But what I mean by that is, this gets down to basic laws of supply and demand. And demand right now clearly exceeds supply by a lot. So sellers are able to pick up that benefit and make, an extra kind of kicker, so to speak, because of that particular facet. But that being said, I also think that it can be very stressful for sellers. We're looking at things, as you said, there are a lot of buyers going through their home. There's, as we talked in the first half of the show, multiple offers. You mentioned one property that had 61 offers. Another one might have 6 to 12 offers. But Gary, how does a seller evaluate? I mean, do you just go for the highest price? What do you do as a seller? How do you evaluate what's the best offer?
Well, actually, one of the things that we do is we put together a spreadsheet that lays out all of the offers. And what I find, no matter how many columns in that spreadsheet, it's pretty clear that there are going to be some offers that kind of fall to the ground quickly. Let's say that it's an opportunist putting in a lowball offer. Okay, seller immediately says, "Yeah, I have no interest in that." You also may have some that are eye-opening offers at the other end where it's kind of like, yeah, I'm not sure that this dog's going to hunt. It might be an appraisal issue. We've got some people that are putting in offers today that are so high, it opens up the seller's eyes, but then they can't get the mortgage closed or they can't. And what are they really achieving? It's kind of greed has caught them and it's not a good thing. So we go through and we talk to our sellers about what are the things that are important to you. Some sellers say it's money. Some sellers say it's time frame. Some sellers, we're here, a year celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the 2-week shutdown. A year ago, I had clients that were selling their home in Southborough and they were moving to South Carolina. And their view was, we just want it sold. Okay, we have to sell. And I've talked before, I'm sure that some agents said, well, that was all about greed. It was not about greed. The client needed the house sold and we wanted to help them get their house sold, even though it was a strange time for all of us to figure out what was going on. So every seller has different motivation. We try to capture that by putting it into a spreadsheet and then going through it with the sellers. We're legally obligated to present all the offers, but if you've got, 60 offers, you need to give them some assistance in narrowing down their total review so that it makes some sense. You just can't hand them a stack of paper and say, here you go, let us know what you want to do at the end of the day.
I couldn't agree more, Gary. I think one of the strategies that I've seen out in this crazy market we find ourselves is exactly what you referred to earlier, which is the bidding up of the property. So what you do is you have a buyer that comes in and bids top dollar for that property, but leaves the mortgage contingency in place. And basically what that says is if I don't get my mortgage financing, I get to walk away. They can sometimes even go into that offer thinking, I'll just get this property tied up, I'll get it off the market. I'm pretty confident it's not going to appraise for this purchase price. And then what I'll do is I'll take that appraisal, go back and beat up the seller. Once all the other buyers leave the negotiating table, I'll go back and beat up that seller and get the price lowered down to a price that's more reasonable. But this way I get to win the bid. And by winning the bid and chasing everybody else off, I get the best opportunity to come back and renegotiate later. And I think that that's a very dangerous position to be in, which is why that sellers need advice like you give them to point out that it's not always just the top dollar that's out there. It has to be reasonable. There's other things to look at and make sure that they're going to be in the best position that they can to close that purchase. To be
we had one recently where an offer came in on a property. It was a very strong offer, and it specifically said no home inspection. They had crossed out that paragraph on the offer form, and in the comments they put down waive home inspection. The seller accepted that offer. The very next day, the buyer's agent said, oh, by the way, we're going to want to do a home inspection. So then you're left with, what are you going to do? Okay. If you say, no, you're not going to expect, that wasn't in the contract, well, the buyer can walk because they just decided to. Okay. You don't want to come across like you're hiding something in the property. Why can't we inspect it? I actually come at it from the perspective that says, why not inspect it? Go ahead, come. But this was a case where they had specifically said, we're not going to inspect the property, and that was important to the seller. Okay, so what we ended up doing in that particular case was working with an attorney to get some language put together that said, listen, you're changing the contract now, the offer, and making it so that you are doing a home inspection. We need you to say that you're not going to renegotiate based on the findings of that home inspection, and not just have it be informational, but you're not going to be able to come back and renegotiate. Again, I don't want people buying something that they're not comfortable with, and that's the overarching thing. But at the same time, if I'm representing the seller, and the seller says, and the seller accepts an offer that says no home inspection, frankly, I don't want to hear about a home inspection at that point.
You bring up a great point, Gary. And one of the interesting things about residing in the state that we do, other than the state of confusion, the state of Massachusetts, is that we're a 2-contract state. And so initially on an offer, on most of the offers I see, and I know this is a negotiable point, but people will typically put down $1,000 to bind it. And not that $1,000 is a little bit of money, but certainly in the example that you used, if somebody comes back and says, even so they waived it initially and says, I'm not going to do a home inspection, and then they come back the day after. So again, all the other buyers have left the room, okay, because they've won the bid. They come back and say, by the way, we're doing one, and you say no. They say, okay, fine, keep our $1,000, whatever, if that, right? Keep our $1,000. We're on to the next deal, and now you have no buyers lined up for this. So right. It's in other states they go right to purchase and sale agreement, which changes the whole dynamic of this renegotiation part. So it's a very interesting structure that we have, but again, it goes down to this communication part and advising your clients and making sure that everybody kind of understands what's going into this, and being aware of some of the techniques that buyers are using now to try to come back and renegotiate, because they're not able to renegotiate. They're not able to get that strong negotiation up front, where in a normal market they might have been. So now they're using other kind of tricky moves to be able to do that. And you advising the sellers of their position and guiding them, I think, is really important.
When the offer comes in, I know that that's not the final purchase and sale, but it is a contract. Okay. And for me, it becomes moral, ethical, and all that. If you said, to beat the home inspection thing to death, if you said no home inspection, then don't come back and say you want a home inspection. That ship has already sailed.
Right.
Same thing with radon and all that stuff. If there are things that you want to have checked in the house, then do it. I certainly get that, if there's an appraisal issue, that's something altogether different. And some people are now coming in with language in their offers that say, we'll make up any difference in an appraisal shortfall if there is one. Okay, that's good. don't be surprised if that lever gets pulled then, and don't be, grumpy and say, well, the house isn't worth what you said it was worth. Well, actually, the house is worth what someone will pay for it.
That's right.
And appraisers may have a differing view, but if you want the house, you got to make up the difference. You're absolutely right. The risk is people put stuff on the table that sellers' eyes get really big on, and they go running for it. And then all of a sudden the deal falls apart. And it's in my opinion, it's one of those things that I'll get going on a rant again. It's one of those things that bothers me because it's moral and ethical. Do the right thing.
Absolutely, Gary. And I think that, one of the things that's important is that we find ourselves in a market where it's important that sellers not only get your guidance and guidance from someone like me, but also attorneys' guidance. So many of the issues that we're confronted with are legal in nature. I had a client that basically wanted to waive the mortgage contingency, and legally, I of course cannot advise them to waive a mortgage contingency, even though I can feel 100% confident or 99% confident they're going to get their mortgage. It looks great, everything looks great, but I can't say to them, yeah, go ahead and do it, because if something happens and they lose their job or something, I would be responsible. So we had to get an attorney involved so that the attorney could explain to them, this is potentially what could happen. Does it look good? Yeah, you look fine in general, but you need to go into this eyes wide open. And that's the difference. They have to be more open than they've ever been before because of the potential moving forward. And even with sellers, again, if you accept an offer, you're bound by that offer. You could have another offer come in, a better offer the next day, and you're tied up once you accept that offer. Am I correct, Gary?
That's correct. Well, actually, in theory, you're able to continue to show the property, etc., until the purchase and sale is done. In practice, once the property has an accepted offer, most people take off and say, yeah, okay, done.
But you bring up a great point, which is that the purchase and sale is the offer is a legal contract. You're absolutely right. But the purchase and sale, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the buyer has 5% down. The home, if there is a home inspection, that's already been gone through. There's not a lot of renegotiating based on that. And the only leftover clause, the out clause, is that mortgage contingency, which, if there is one, which hopefully there is, that says that the buyer doesn't get their financing, they must notify the seller by X date. And that's their out clause. Other than that,
how many times do you get a call saying, don't give me the mortgage?
I have not received that call very often.
No, but it's like the final cord that you can pull on the parachute. And I'm sure you've gotten the call. I know you can't do it, but yeah, I'm sure you get the call.
Gary, I've had people say, and I say, I unless you get fired, you've applied in good faith. You need to, there's this thing in the contracts called due diligence. You need to operate in good faith. If you don't apply for a mortgage and then you go to the mortgage contingency and say, well, I didn't get a mortgage, well, you didn't fulfill the due diligence part. So
I actually had someone say recently, I'm going to go out and buy a car. They won't know about it and I won't get the mortgage that way. Brad, how does someone reach you?
Best way to reach me is via my cell phone, which is 978-375-5531, or they can reach me via email at Avergon, that's Bavergon at envisionbank.com. And Gary, how do they reach you?
Gary is at 508-733-6005, and I can be reached at Gary@movewithgary.com. I want to thank you, Brad, as always. I want to thank Keith and Ted and everyone else that participates in putting together this little shoe, and look forward to talking to you again next month.
Absolutely, Gary. Be well, everyone.
You've been listening to All Things Real Estate on Full Service Radio, 830 WCRN.